Yes, hi.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay, we're going to use those two.
Okay. So.
No matter how much you try to practice.
Welcome to the 5th season in the 30th season of the Sundays at 2 program. My name is Sheila Stepko, and I'm a member of the Sundays at 2 committee. Before we introduce our speaker, I'd like to introduce the people who bring this program to you. We have an awesome committee of 6 volunteers, all residents of or working in Lancaster County. Lucia Scholware is our chairperson. Ernie Munching, Sandy Toomey, Sandy's in the back, Pat Tracy, Bud Ward, and myself. Our library director, Alice Cooper, is an ex officio member of our committee. Although she's on a well-deserved vacation, we recognize the outstanding technical support we receive from the library's technology specialist, Shelley Robertson. She's on a cruise somewhere.
When you get the beat, you'll love it.
When you fill out your evaluations, please note that today is the 5th of 6 speaker presentations. We had to reschedule Dr. Malisi for the 22nd of March because of the freeze that we had. Please take one of the flyers on the table outlining the rest of the program and plan to join us for the last session of the season. Your feedback drives our speaker selection, so you help us choose the speakers for next season. We also urge you to buy a library lottery ticket after the presentation. $100 gets you a chance to win $5,000. It also supports this and other wonderful programs that our library offers to the community. We'd like to say thank you to the town of Kilmarnock for flying the flags at half-staff in honor of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. We welcome those today who are watching live on Facebook, and I'd like to say a special hello to a very special guest who's watching us in Atlanta, Dr. Baker Rogers' mother, Mrs. Marion Rogers.
Yeah.
And if you miss it today, you can watch it later. It'll be posted on the LCL Facebook page and YouTube channel. And Shelley said it will come up about the 18th of March when she returns from her cruise. Our board president, Ann Hughes, has a brief message for you.
Very brief because Alina will have a lot to say, I'm sure. But we are doing surveys now, and we hope that you can go online and do the user survey. If you have a card, anyone who has a card can fill out the survey. We're in the process of doing our strategic plan, and we are focusing on literacy, family literacy, digital literacy, and so we'd like your opinions and ideas on not only our services and our existing programs, but what else could we offer, and we need your voice. By the way, the middle school students and the high school students are also completing this survey. So that's going to be really powerful to hear from them. Often, the forgotten group. The other piece that I wanted to share with you was the applicant. Oh, we also have the donor survey that's online, and we have copies of both surveys outside. So if you do it on paper, it's anonymous. We'll take it, we'll fold it up, and then we'll put that into our Google Forms and get an analysis on it and use that data to help us with our new strategic plan. And our raffle tickets are $100. If you buy them on St. Patrick's Day, you'll get an extra cookie or a cupcake or something. We'll be right here, and I know we'll be wearing green. And I will also be selling tickets outside afterwards. Thank you very much.
Dr. Alina Baker Rogers is a retired university administrator and assistant professor of higher education leadership and research. She completed her master's and doctorate degrees in education at the University of Pennsylvania and Widener University. Prior to vocating to the Northern RIC in 2013, she held leadership roles on numerous nonprofit boards, as well as mayoral and gubernatorial advisory committees in her hometown of Philadelphia. Dr. Baker Rogers is co-author of They Carried Us, The Social Impact of Philadelphia's Black Women Leaders. She's a former board member of the Lancaster Community Library, where she chaired the education committee. She's currently a part-time lecturer of adult education at Rappahannock Community College. Please welcome my colleague and friend, Dr. Lena Baker Rogers. 4 years ago, Alina was on this same stage talking about book writing, from ideas to publication. I was a new member of the committee at that time, and this is where we met, on this very stage. That meeting would lead to a collaboration that brings her back today to talk about her newest project. And incidentally, today is International Women's Day, so a salute to all the women working to make our world a better, more peaceful place to live. 4 years ago, you had already decided that you were ready to begin a new project researching your family history. Tell us about your early steps and discoveries.
My early steps and discoveries were probably like a lot of other folks who don't know a whole lot about what you should know about. We tend to think that family history, a lot of us, that we all know it. I did not know it. There was very limited information that I had, and if it weren't for my maternal grandmother, my nanny, I would have not known much at all. That was until I met another cousin through social media, Mark Thomas actually gave me some information, more information into our background than I had. But what I knew from my nanny and what kept me steady, she was a minister, so I believed everything she said. Sorry, Mommy. Was that we were Northern Blacks, and we had no connection to Africa, and for that matter, for the South. That was what my grandmother told me, and that was what I believed for a very, very, very long time. And then this. So what we have here on the screen is the reality of it. The reality of it is that after doing DNA research through Ancestry, I discovered that I am 87% Western African. And that percentage is actually above the norm, which is more like 72%, something like that. And so the regions that you see here are the conglomerate in West Africa, except there is this 10% that's related to Ireland. And I think you can see that in me, can't you? So yeah, this was all a shocker. It really was. The majority of here are the percentages here. You can see them more broken down, more specifically my ancestral regions by percentages. And I would say Nanny, I have some more information for you, and she might find it helpful if she was still with us.
And this is just a pictorial it shows the different regions in Africa, the western part of Africa, where Alina's ancestors actually came from. Okay. Who or what prompted you to begin this search for your ancestors, and how much did you already know? We've already covered that. I'm sorry, I'm off by a question. On July 4th, our nation will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Am I out of order?
You always are. Dear friend Sheila.
So you had not considered that you had any African ancestry?
No.
That anybody might have been enslaved?
I had not considered that, and I know that, to say that to hear that perhaps sounds shocking, but you don't know what you don't know, and you can only go by what you have been told. And in my family, as you'll hear, there may have been quite a bit to indicate that we were not connected to Africa, particularly in the sense how history has demeaned Africans and blacks. But I come from a very highly educated black family, and that apparently was against what people would think is normal.
So this map shows where the little dots are that perhaps Manny Carey was a little bit off on not knowing about Southern ancestors.
She was off quite a bit, and I love my nanny, so do not get the wrong impression. She raised me well. But what this map does show shows all of the areas in which my family was enslaved. It shows a deep penetration in the South, obviously, and it shows also a lot of movement. And that movement was forced movement. Later on, you hear about our trek to places that we wanted to be, but for the most part, what you see here is forced movement.
On July 4th, our nation will celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration outlined the ideals of liberty and equality, and those applied primarily to white male property owners. So I'm going to ask you, Alina, to walk backwards and share the complex story of your Emory ancestors. We'll start with those, going back to 1776.
I found this fella, and I feel that way about him. He's my third great-grandfather. His name was Caesar Emory. Of course, I didn't know him, but I feel like I've come to know him. I learned about Caesar probably early on in the process. He had two older brothers by the name of Charles and Toby, who were enslaved by a little boy, a little 15-year-old boy. Actually, he was enslaved by William's father first, and when his father died, 15-year-old William, inherited 600 acres of land, as well as any enslaved people who were on the property, plantations, and all of that. My great-great-great-grandfather, Caesar, was born, this was in Lunenburg, Virginia. My great-great-grandfather, Caesar, was born several years later in South Carolina, and this was after William had moved the family from Virginia to South Carolina. So they were first in Lunenburg, and then he moved them down to Chester County, South Carolina. And that's where my grandfather Caesar was born in 1773. The two brothers and another probably 12 or 13 other enslaved people, including 3 women who at some point there were 15 of them, and that 15 at some point William made a decision, really good decision, to move them from Chester County, South Carolina, to Knox County, Indiana. And it was in Knox where he freed them. He freed all 15.
In 1815.
In 1815, okay, yeah, he freed them all. And they were able to establish in an area called Cherry Grove, and I do have some articles over there about Cherry Grove. It was a free black settlement. They were able to settle there. He gave them each some land as well, and they stayed there for quite a bit until it was probably when shortly after my great, that would be Caesar's son, J.C. Emory, sometime after that. But while they were still there at Cherry Grove, Caesar, now with some type of money he was able to, that he got from William Emory, he was able to actually donate an acre of the land that he was given to the development of a church by the name of Maria Creek. So, he just started off real early on doing really fantastic things. The family eventually, this is my grandfather and their family, actually he had married a woman by the name of Patsy. So Caesar, Patsy, and the 2 children, that's my my great-great-grandfather, J.C. Embry, they then moved to Galena, Illinois. Lots of moving. So originally in Lunenburg, down to Chester County, South Carolina, up to Knox County, Indiana, and then to Galena, Illinois. And there they stayed for a good period of time. Should I continue? So the fella in the left corner is my great-great-grandfather, James Crawford Embry, who became a minister and a bishop. The woman who's next to him is actually my great-great-grandmother, my great-grandmother, Elizabeth, his daughter. And in the corner is my grandmother, the one Nanny who I referred to. And then there's my mom. There. Yeah, exactly. I heard something about her being on the watching. So, can I talk about JC? Okay, so JC, as that was what he was named, is known as JC. JC actually, he settled in Galena, and he married there. He married my, actually would be my second. No, he married her later. He married the first of 4 wives. I wouldn't say that. He married the very first of 4 wives while he was in Galena. Importantly, when he was there, he also tried to join the Union Army and was prohibited from doing so because of his color. He did, however, volunteer for Grant's Army by ferrying supplies up and down the Mississippi River. He later, I guess about a year later, if you want to switch the slides, he joined the African Methodist Episcopal Ministry. And we went back to Cherry Grove. Yeah, we're out of water. Okay. Let's just leave it there. So he, as I was saying, so he was unable to join and fight for the Union. And then about a year later, after he did some volunteering, he joined the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and he was ordained eventually in 1866. He was ordained a minister then. He, in 1872, married my great-great-grandmother, Oregon. I'm skipping. We're not ready for Oregon. I don't want to talk about Oregon. So let me tell you more about JC then, because apparently I'm skipping. So JC, this is one of his publications, and I have it in a plastic bag because I don't want anybody to touch it, but you can feel free to pass it around. There were not a lot of folks, black folks who were doing a lot of writing back then that would have been noticed in the way that he was doing. And what this Indianapolis News, as you see this paper said about him, was that Dr. J.C. Embry of Philadelphia by then, he was probably the first colored man to publish a standard work on theology, and Embry's Digest is known far and wide.
And while we were doing research, we found numerous newspaper articles that referenced meetings that he attended, public actions that he was involved in, lawsuits. He traveled widely throughout the southern United States and was in the newspaper on a regular basis. Bishop Embry's life, unfortunately, was filled with a number of personal tragedies. Alina mentioned he did marry 4 times. He had 4 wives and 9 children who preceded him in death. His first 2 wives, one was Roseanne and the second was Mary, died young. Probably both died in childbirth, would be my guess. There are no death certificates at that time. By 1870, he was 36 years old. and he had buried those first 2 wives and 6 of his children. And that leads us to his third wife, who is Aliner's great-great-grandmother, and another interesting branch of the family tree. So she's going to tell us about Oregon Franklin and her parents.
I do want to say about Oregon, I skipped ahead earlier because I was so excited about talking about it. If ever we could figure out what the middle initial for her stands for, her name is Oregon P. Franklin. And we have no idea what the P is, but I'm determined. I do want to thank a cousin of mine who's on Facebook Live as well. It's because of my cousin Marge that I was able to gather a lot of information about this branch of our family. And in fact, she had a treasure trove of my grandfather's trunk, and it had a lot of documents in it at the house in South Philadelphia. So in terms of Oregon's family, her parents were Samuel and why am I blocking on her name? Emily Jane. Yeah, her parents were Samuel and Emily Jane. Samuel was born in 1831, Virginia. Emily Jane was born 1832, South Carolina. There's no records of them until 1850, when you see them listed in the census records for Little Rock. I believe it was Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock, Arkansas, right? Yeah, another place. And when they were listed in the census records were interesting. They were not always accurate, although we do a whole lot of relying on these records. They had my ancestors listed as white, and they had them living with a gentleman who was also white. I'm going to call him a border. I don't know why I want to say that, but I just do. And the one thing that they had correct was that my grandfather was a cook, and he was a cook for a long time. So that was correct. Do we have one where we can show what happened with them? They would be Act 151 that I want to refer to. So they were in Little Rock, and then they had to leave. Not just them, but every free black in Little Rock in 1859 was told to leave or be re-enslaved. And we had until January 1st, 1860 to do that. So, my ancestors had to leave from Little Rock and go to Cairo, Illinois here. Actually, they went along the Mississippi River to get there. Okay.
And then in Illinois, Emily Jane was pregnant and had a baby in Illinois before they continued on their journey.
Right, so they'd stop and have the baby. And the journey then involved going overland through St. Louis, Missouri, and finally on to Leavenworth, Kansas.
At that time, Kansas was a free state.
And that's where they remained. But what was very wonderful about Samuel and Emily Jane was that they really became a part of the fabric of Leavenworth. So much so that they were in the news, which is very unusual. So this is the obituary notice for my great-great-grandfather Samuel. It notes here that, I find this quite interesting, it notes here that he's the father-in-law of, and I'm getting ahead of myself, it notes here that he's the father-in-law of William T. Vernon, another relative of mine who was a bishop, and I'll get back to there. But what they're saying about my grandfather was that he was thoroughly versed in the early history of Leavenworth and was acquainted with the men who played parts in shaping the destinies of the state. One of the things that Sheila and I have found interesting is that he had, so in case you haven't noticed, so my grandmother's name was Oregon. They also had daughters by the name of Minnesota and Michigan. I take that as he knew some stuff, but he was very interested in territories and states and development and all of that. So this is excerpted from that last paragraph. And then this was his wife, Emily Jane Franklin, the first Emily Jane Franklin, because there were others, at least one other. And she was well known as well. And she was a member of the Good Samaritan Society. Again, you'll note that she was the mother of the bishop's wife. That would be their daughter. And then she was the grandmother of the wife of another bishop. So there are a lot, not a lot, but there are bishops in my family. And
but it is so unusual to find an obituary with this much detail for a black woman. She died in, I believe, 1907. Just an incredibly rare find.
yeah. Kind of cool.
Okay. In 1872, the Embry and Franklin branches of the family were combined when the Reverend J.C. Embry married his third wife, Oregon Franklin. And unfortunately, we do not have a picture of Oregon. They had 5 children, and before Oregon's untimely death in San Antonio, Texas, at the young age of 33. One of their daughters was named Emily Jane after her grandmother. This is Emily Jane. And she had quite an interesting life. Tell us more about Emily Jane and William T. Vernon.
So Emily Jane was a graduate of Wilberforce University, one of the first HBCUs, one of the first. So she was a graduate of Wilberforce. And she married this fellow by the name of William Tecumseh. I heard somebody say Tecumseh, so you're familiar with that name, right? William Tecumseh Vernon. That's the picture of the two of them right there. Now he later became a bishop, but before then he was a president of Western University. He was president of Western University. He also was registrar of the United States Treasury.
The first African-American registrar of the Treasury.
Appointed by Roosevelt in 1906, and then again a second appointment by Taft in 1910. He didn't stay in the second term long, but he had been appointed by 2 presidents as registrar of the Treasury, which is pretty impressive. No matter who it is, right?
And we actually have his signature.
Yeah.
Because he signed, they weren't called dollars at that point, it was called notes, but we have a copy of his signature, and it was on every note that was printed during that time frame.
And I just want to say this about Emily, even though we're talking about her name, she was my great-grandmother's sister. So if you think back to that first slide, the one that had my mother and a couple of the woman who was in the top right-hand corner, they were sisters. Yeah.
And tell us about this picture.
So this picture here, I think it was right around the time he became bishop. They were appointed twice, or rather asked to serve twice as missionaries to South Africa to promote education. And this was one of their, I want to say, tours of duty. Look Mighty Rugged. I love all of the photographs that I was able to get my hands on from Kansas State University Library. Just a treasure trove of photographs with them. This is one of my favorites. I think they were a little tired. It was probably hot. Fully dressed.
Notice how Emily Jane is fully dressed. If I might.
Go on, I know you want to. Go on.
Emily Jane was a bishop's wife, and she was very proper.
Very.
Very proper. And she wrote home to her sister, complaining because the African children were running around naked.
She couldn't help herself. It's interesting because when I think about my grandmother, who would have been, gosh, help me here, that would have been her, that's right, her aunt. So she would have been my grandmother's aunt. Thank you, Missy. I appreciate that. And this prim and properness that had defined the people in my family, both men and women, I find it quite interesting. I think I'll just leave it there. You see what?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, lady.
So we're going to move to another branch of,
I just want to say one thing.
go ahead.
So, Nanny, again, I think we knew a little bit about Africa. Just a little bit.
Okay, we're going to move to another maternal branch of the family tree. And if you could tell us a little bit about Moses Leonard and what you discovered about the Leonard line, please.
Yes, so Moses was another third, sorry, ever, another third grandfather of mine who was actually enslaved on the Eastern Shore. He was born sometime around 1800. He was freed by his enslaver in 1826. And shortly thereafter, he met his wife, Nellie Jackson. Their son, William Leonard Sr., who you see here, was, I guess, my second great-grandfather. His son, Stanley, married my nanny. It all goes back to Nanny, in case you missed that.
Got your generation off the fence.
But let's go back to Nanny eventually. So he married, so his father, Moses, married Nellie Jackson. I want to say that two of, I guess it would be William's brothers, two of William's brothers actually did serve in the Union Army. And they were in the U.S., I think they call it the U.S. Colored Infantry. And so they were able to serve. That's just wonderful. Just another piece of a tidbit of information that just really touches my heart. It really does. So when Moses died, though, in 1870, the family migrated to Philadelphia. And I should say emphatically that Philadelphia became the chosen destination for my family. All roads went to Philadelphia.
Now we're going to travel to the Deep South. And your final maternal line, which takes you to a rural area northwest of Macon, Georgia. And what would you like to share about the Walkers?
So the Walkers, so up top you'll see my great-grandfather, Alan. His wife, Fanny, her maiden name was Hagood, I believe it was. And then this handsome fellow down in the corner is their son. He's my grandfather, Reverend Gray Gordon Walker. And that's my mom again. Yeah, but I figured I'd put in another photograph of her. Different. I won't tell you how young she was in the first one, or how old she is in this one. But anyway, so the Walkers actually, my grandfather was actually born enslaved in 1862. His wife Fanny was born in 1869. They lived in Monroe County. They married in 1888, I believe it was. They were sharecroppers until eventually Alan was able to manage a sawmill. So, in terms of, can you hear me? Yeah. So, in terms of their, in terms of what we know about my Walker ancestors, we have really good leads about their family, their parentage. Not quite confirmed yet, but we do have really good leads about them. We also have very, very, very good leads about their enslavers as well. My grandfather, Gray, was the So, again, with my grandfather, he graduated from college and he was 84. And then 84, he was again an ordained minister, as I said, and he lived to 101. My nanny, again, back to her, she lived to 95. And I want to say, I'm not sure, depending on what your feeling is about it, that either does or doesn't bode well for what I can expect.
Try this, because they will hear you on Facebook.
So they live long, as Spock would say. We're going to have to share the mic, okay? I don't want to share the mic with you. One other thing I want to say about my grandfather is that he was a veteran. Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'm not on here.
We hear you. We're good.
Okay, we're going to pivot now to the paternal side. All of those ancestors were from the maternal side, and we know a lot more about them than we do the paternal side. We were working this. When I first met Alina, she said, we can do this in about 6 months.
It's been 4 years. 4 years later.
So we're going to pivot to the paternal side. Each year, Historic Christ Church sponsors a reading of the Declaration of Independence, and they invite young people to read the names of the signers. Last summer, my grandson was visiting, and he was a reader. He was randomly assigned the state of South Carolina. One of the signers from South Carolina was Thomas Hayward. Alina, could you please explain your connection to Thomas Hayward?
Thomas Hayward was a member of one of America's largest slaveholding families. I'll just let that sit with you for a second. He married into wealth. He got plantations, he got land, and he got human beings. Ancestor of mine by the name of Lot Proctor was born on one of those plantations. It was called Calf Pen. He was born on one of those plantations in 1835, as documented by the Freedmen's records. She was kind of looking at me because we don't really understand how I'm connected to Lot and his wife Lucy. However, they ended up with ancestors of mine in the same household, and those ancestors were Mott and Addie Rogers, hence mine. Yeah. So names sort of go back, a long time and stay. Well, you heard that with Ebony Jane as well. So the relationship really between the four of them, Lot and Lucy and Mott and Addie, we're still not quite sure. However, in my family, Lot and Lucy are members of our family, as well as Mott and Addie. We also don't know the parentage of Mott and Addie's family. In other words, we're not quite sure who their parents were. But what I do know is that they had this wonderful daughter by the name of Ruth, who was my great-grandmother. And that's her there. And Ruth had a daughter by the name of Elizabeth, my grandmother. And that handsome bloke there is my dad. Now, he was a bit younger then, but if you recall the picture of him and my mother, you can see why they kind of liked each other. So Mott and Addie had hoped to make it to Philadelphia, that we know, but they did not. But all of their children did, including my great-grandmother Ruth. So 6 of their children made it to Philadelphia.
So you've shared with us all the known branches of your family tree. Can you share some of the biggest frustrations that you encountered while searching for your ancestors?
Well, let me just say one thing before I answer that question. This board that's behind Sheila, and actually, let me say something before I say that. Sheila and I have been working on my ancestry for 4 years now. And she's a colleague, and she's a friend, and
I'm going to interrupt her right here because we first started doing this at the Lancaster, Virginia Historical Society. I was working, I'm a volunteer there. Alina had an appointment, she came in, and she said, I think I found the Franklin family in Bedford County. I think this is my family. So we looked at it, and there were the right names and the right ages, but they were white people. And she had not seen that particular column.
I had not noticed that. You know, this is why it's really helpful to have someone who knows how to do genealogy help you read things, because you can make some quick and fast mistakes that will lead you down some wrong roads. What did happen, however, was that poster that I was indicating that's behind Sheila. That was what I started with.
And when she started, she had a family tree and ancestry with 200 people, roughly 200 people on it. She is now up to almost 3,000 ancestors on her tree.
Yeah.
We have discovered.
Yes. Yes.
She has come a long way.
You have come a long way. We have come a long way. We like each other a little bit. You know, and thank you. I want to say thank you for all of your help.
Thank you for coming to Sundays at 2 4 years ago.
Yes.
Yes, I did the project and I didn't know it.
So the frustrations, you know, the frustrations are when there's a connection, and that is someone who you've determined, you've discovered is a relative, and you want to reach out to them, and you do, and they don't want to have anything to do with you. It gets easier, but it does not soothe the not knowing. Okay, and this just happened again, maybe a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. So that's a general way to answer that question. A more specific way to answer that question would be to say that I would love to find my paternal grandfather. The fellow who we know as our grandfather loved him to death. He was a great grandfather, but he was not my biological grandfather. And so I'd love to find my biological grandfather and his family. So that's very frustrating.
Recently, through DNA testing, we have discovered someone who is close enough with the DNA match. I'm pursuing that particular line. I think it will lead to Alina's paternal grandfather. At least I'm hoping. DNA testing has opened a whole new window into doing family research. It's amazing what you can find.
Yeah.
So finding your roots can take you on an emotional journey. Writing a book to preserve your family's legacy is a huge undertaking. Why did you accept the challenge? That's the migration map. All roads lead to Philadelphia. Sorry, we skipped that one.
Well, this is the migration map, though. I mean, you know, Sheila and I were trying to put this map together. At one point I said to her, it's busy. But you know what? It was. It was busy and it was messy. It was some shame involved in it. And then when we got to Philadelphia, hallelujah. These people here, this is a 5-generation photograph, and Sheila's often asked me, why are you doing this? One is because I want to know, but I also want this little girl here, this little teeny tiny one here. That's my great-granddaughter. Not my granddaughter. That's my great-granddaughter. That's my granddaughter. That's my daughter. This is my mom. And they let me sit with them. And it was 5-generational photograph. And Delilah, what's that great name? Is really for me, I want her to know as much as she can about her family. And that's obviously about her mother's family, her maternal line. I'd like to make sure she knows as much as possible about us, where we came from.
Alina, thank you for sharing your story with our Sundays at 2 audience. And I'd like to close with this quote from Stephen Hawking. It is the past that tells us who we are. Without it, we lose our identity. And now we'll take questions from the audience. Alina, I'm really curious of the draw of Philadelphia for your family. So I heard a lot about the religious leaders in your family.
Yes.
And then education in your family.
Yes.
And it seems, in my understanding of the world, Philadelphia was a hotbed for attracting people, colored people, Negroes,
Sure.
for education and religion. Is that what did it, or something else?
I'm sure that's what did it. It was a place that they could go and be far enough away from the pain and suffering of their early lives. It was a place where they could go and start over and be free. And it was a place that had opportunity, and it does. It did. Yeah.
Baby smiling.
Yeah.
Mister, when did the migration start to Philadelphia? What year was that?
For my family,
Yes,
the
please.
first person in my family who migrated to Philadelphia would have been my great. How do I always do this with him? Embry, great. He was the first one in my family, and I was about 8.
Sorry.
He was the first one. Who was before him then?
The Leonards were there by 1870.
Oh, that's right. It would have been the
They went
Leonards,
from
right?
Salisbury, Maryland.
Right.
After the war, the mother and her sons moved up to Philadelphia. They were there by 1870.
That's right. And then he went, and J.C. went in 1885. Yeah.
He was appointed.
Actually, I don't know how I missed this, but he was appointed to work at the African Methodist Episcopal Publishing House.
He got a little bit out of order.
We got a little bit out of order, so we missed that. Can we go here? Yeah. So he was at the publishing house when he first went there. The following year, this is it here. The following year in 1896, he was appointed the 25th bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is a huge deal. All of these gentlemen here were bishops of the church. And if you can go to the next slide, his holdings were given by a family member of mine to Mother Bethel, where they're now at. Mother Bethel was the first African Methodist Episcopal Church in the United States, the first. And it was founded by Bishop Richard Allen in 1794. And if you can go to the next one. So this is a photograph here of Richard Allen, but you'll see by my great-grandfather's name here, Bishop James Embry. This was given to his family sometime after they had left his holdings with them.
And if I could add, he died of malaria, which he picked up when he was on a mission or on a trip down to South Carolina. Came back home. He was only 62.
Yeah.
He accomplished all of those things in 62 years.
Yes. Yeah. Things like copies of marriage certificates, birth records, his Bible, handkerchief. Don't laugh, Margie, because my cousin was listening. I told her I'd say the handkerchief, things like that. Yeah.
How did DNA enter into this, and when did it help you?
How did it enter into this, and when did it help me?
When did DNA?
I'm I'm not sure what the question
When she
is.
started doing research, she joined Ancestry.com, which many of you may have heard of, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
she
Yes.
took the DNA test, as did her mother, which is so helpful, and some of her nephews. If you're not familiar with it, basically what it does, it shows you who you match with. Anybody else who tests, and it shows how many, they're called centimorgans, it shows how many centimorgans you share with someone else, and that tells you roughly what relationship they are. So the person that I'm working on right now shares 206 centimorgans with Alina, which makes, and because I know her age and when she lived, she is probably Alina's great aunt. And so I'm working with some of her descendants, one gal who has agreed to talk to me, and then there was the other gentleman who didn't want any part of this, which sometimes happens, and trying to figure out if it's possible that one of her family members could be Alina's paternal grandfather. So it's a lot of detective work, and
It's good that you have a detective. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were asking. I apologize. Other questions? Yes.
Did you have, do you know how far back your family members came to the Americas, to the colonies, or whatever we were, in the 1700s, and from Nigeria, or do you know where they came into, or?
Well, there's what we know are where the ports were. So there was a port in Alexandria, Virginia. There was a port in Philadelphia. There was a port in Charleston. So we know where the ports were. Yeah, they came in through those ports. We have not been able to do any identification beyond, I think, Caesar 1773, which is pretty early.
More and more records are being put online, which makes the research easier. I had never done African American research prior to meeting Alina. So it was a steep learning curve for me, but I had been doing research for about 30 years. There are a number of, there's a new museum in Charleston dedicated to all of the records that they can find concerning slave ships, when they arrived, who, if there were any records that listed the names of people, where they came from. So more and more resources are becoming available. But like Samuel and Emily Jane, who show up in 1850, where were they before that? I haven't been able to find them, so I think probably they were teleported or whatever.
That's our thought about those two, that they were teleported.
You know,
Yeah.
they were just plunked down, and why Little Rock of all places?
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know where they met, because in all the records, he said he was from Virginia. She always said she was from South Carolina.
Yeah.
They were consistent with that over the years. Where did they meet? Why? You know, where did Sam learn to cook? He was a cook all of his life. He held a number of different jobs. We don't know, and those I haven't been able to find, but we keep looking.
And I have taken the liberty of, because I'm a writer, I have a 178-page manuscript, historical fiction, which historically and creatively fills in a whole lot of those blanks. Inspired by.
When is it going to be published?
Oh, as soon as I find a publisher, point him in my direction, I'm ready for it. Doug. Yes, sir.
I lived in Washington, D.C. for many, many years, and I'm wondering, have you shared your research? Have you gone back to the African American History Museum at the Smithsonian? Yes?
I love that museum.
Yeah.
I have not done that, and I should probably do that. That's a great idea.
You should.
Yeah, no, Doug, that's a great idea.
I think she should do a road trip actually, and go to Knox County, Indiana. They were very helpful when we contacted the people there. We got information from them. Did you mention the Underground Railroad?
I did that. I forgot to mention the Underground Railroad was when I mentioned Cherry Grove settlement where the Embreys were freed. That was likely an Underground Railroad stop for folks who wanted to make it up to Canada. So, up or out. I've just done geography or person to up or out to Canada.
You can take a city person out of the city, and they are completely lost. So Alina has learned about counties and townships and
territories. Don't forget those. Territories.
And it's been a learning experience for both of us. There have been a lot of tears. We've uncovered a lot of stuff that was very, very sad.
Yeah.
And we've had unexpected joys. And we've had a good 4 years.
We really have. And if there's any reason why, she hasn't referred to me to Dr. Baker Rogers yet, it's because we got this really good bond going on. It's collegial, it's friendship, and she was the person who I needed when I walked into Karen's place up there in Lancaster, the Historical Society, to start my work.
If there are no more questions, we would like to invite all of you to please leave your surveys on the table, and we have refreshments for you in the outer room, and Alina is here to talk with you afterwards and answer any of your other questions. Thank you so
Hello, Charles.